Yes, also warm welcome from our side. We are very happy to present today to you really a glimpse of a recent study we have conducted on behalf of BEREC together with YouGov and Deloitte. And we were looking at the topic of net neutrality from a consumer's perspective, and we did that on a European basis. So we conducted both qualitative and quantitative research for this particular study in 4 European countries, and added to that, from our own budget, from our own research interest, 3 of the major markets, namely Germany, the UK, and the US, to also give you and everyone some insights into how consumers look at neutrality in those 3 major markets. Now, what was the sort of motivation for our study? I would say that overall, the topic of net neutrality is already very well established from a supply side point of view. However, there's very little or even any evidence from the demand side. So also consumers will effectively be regulated very soon. The new EU regulation, as you all surely know, will enter into force around the 2nd week of November of this year. Nonetheless, very few has been done on actually understanding what consumers think of net neutrality. And when you think of consumers and net neutrality, what you usually think of is something like that. Consumers in the streets protesting pro-net neutrality, pro-equal treatment, pro-open internet, without necessarily knowing what is going on behind the scenes, where you are the experts, obviously. And we wanted to sort of enrich the debate by a representative view into consumers' values, consumers' attitudes, and perspectives towards net neutrality. And in fact, what we found was a very much more multifaceted picture. Isn't that right, Anna?
Absolutely. Our first learning was that, it's not surprising, net neutrality is not a term that consumers are aware of. They are demonstrating, but they don't really grasp the idea. And how could they? Because we had to go further, and we had in-depth discussions with several consumers across Europe, and we learned a lot from them. We learned that traffic management actually is a much better term to communicate the subject, what's behind it, the idea of it. Why is that so? We discussed with the consumers, and we learned that net neutrality as a term is very misleading, as consumers associated basic democratic principles rather than traffic management, for example. They thought it's like, the internet is ours, everybody needs to have access to the internet, and it's our lives, actually. So net neutrality as a term is too technical for the normal consumers, and they are able to relate to the idea that traffic management needs to be done online, as there's a big and continuously growing stream of data that needs to be brought from A to B. So they are aware of it and they are fine with it. But as they don't care about what's behind, they don't care about the technicalities, they are not interested in it. What they are interested in, what they care about is their experience, actually. How they can use the internet, how they can use several applications. And what we learned is the internet and the role of the internet plays a very huge role in consumers' lives today across Europe. And they hope, actually, that traffic management supports and leads to the best possible experience of their internet every day, for not only themselves, but for others as well. So they are very social when it comes up to the internet. So what are they using it for? They are using it especially for for news, for having access to news without censorship. So they feel if they're able to not only read the normal newspaper, but to use the internet for having access to news, they are able to having several independent sources. So it's very important for them. Not only news are important, but it's very important to have kind of community online, to stay in touch with their friends, with their family, wherever they live. So this was very important as well. So internet is very social, and they can't stand the idea of being cut off. So as you can see, it's woven into their lives, and it's very hard for them to have the idea of being disconnected or having an unstable connection. So in this light, it's not very surprising that, in fact, consumers across Europe, as we will see, state that equal and unrestricted access is a human right. So it's very basic democratic principle. So we can see, you can see here the top two boxes, which mean that the numbers are on people that either strongly agree or rather somewhat agree to our statement that it's a human right. And you can see it's, partly more than 80% of people feeling it's their right. Everybody should have access without any restrictions. And as we can see, when compared to the US, it's not that different. As also in the US, 2/3 of the people state the same. But, as we can see, some consumers even want more. And who are those consumers?
Well, that's a good question. And we have actually been looking into that because not only did we discuss with consumers in focus groups and try to explore in depth what their thoughts and values and attitudes connected to net neutrality are, but we also conducted, on a quantitative basis, representative surveys in all of these countries. And we were looking at, well, who is it who wants to purchase possibly prioritized services? How large can that segment possibly be? And we see for all of the countries that we've looked at that there is quite a substantial segment of consumers that is at least positively engaged with the idea that there might be others, or themselves even, who pay a little bit more for a little bit more service, a little bit more quality of experience, for instance, a little bit less latency. And we dug a bit deeper into that, looking at, well, who are these consumers? We tried to segment consumers based on their purchase preferences regarding a relatively large number of net neutrality attributes, which we looked at in a conjoined experiment, which gives us not a simple stated measure of their preference, but an actual measure of their preference, because it's a choice-based approach with sort of real products that people have to engage with in that method. And the active multimedia users were, from that analysis, the segment who were mostly interested in those net neutrality features, who were most interested in purchasing, say, quality differentiated services, for instance, and were also willing to pay for that a little bit more. And as you can see from our slide, it's, again, in all of the 4 markets that we did the extensive study on, it's, again, a quite substantial segment, a quite substantial market segment that there is for ISPs in those markets. However, there's also another segment, sort of the opposite segment, who maybe even want a little bit less service, but pay also a little bit less for that. And these are the pragmatic average users, we call them. And again, on the other side of the market, we see around, well, 28, 23%, so sort of a fourth of the consumer base in each of those markets would fall into that category, where again, a different kind of product differentiation may be quite beneficial to ISPs. Now, to wrap it up, what are our main conclusions as regards the value of net neutrality to European consumers? We found, first of all, that their attitudes are much more nuanced than it's usually stipulated in the public debate. So not all of the consumers are strongly pro a strict net neutrality rule. In fact, even quite a fair number of them would be interested in purchasing either prioritized or capped services. We also found that, yes, there is a market for differentiated IaaS products. We found, and I think this is quite interesting in terms of future research, because we found quite significant differences across those countries. And we feel it would be very interesting and necessary to extend that insight also to other countries, as well as bring the net neutrality theme more upfront in products, for instance, in terms of the traffic management and the effects that it may have on consumer experience, which, on the other hand, as we saw, given the baseline impression and attitude of consumers that really open and free internet access is a human right, this might perhaps be not the easiest task, and we see also this caveat, say, of the research and our results, to communicate to consumers from an ISP's point of view. And with that, we thank you very much for your attention. We look forward to speaking to you, well, with some wine, with some beer, with some snacks later on. Or if you want to find us also on LinkedIn, on Xing, we would be happy to get in contact. Thanks very much.